Well, if I started my lesson, my preaching, by handing out, here we go, by handing out $5 bills to the congregation, do you think we would start to get more people in the pews? Do you think the word would get out that, you know what, every once in a while, $5 bills get passed out, and particularly, maybe people would sit up closer. Maybe these would get filled up. The word might get around, and even at mobile church, I think the word's getting around. Call in at 9, and you might get a $5 bill in the mail. There is one going out this morning to someone. Well, here's the thing. If God blesses us in ways, if we're given stuff, we're actually supposed to give. God gives to us, and we're supposed to give out. And that's what I think that I found a really interesting lesson in Jonah, in studying particularly chapter 3, but I'm going to show you in the whole thing that, about the lesson here is if God blesses us, we're supposed to bless others and give out. I love to tithe, to give 10% of my income to the church, because God has blessed me financially. God keeps pouring on me, and I love to try to respond to that, to try to give back. If we're blessed, we give. Here's the thing. All of you are stewards of what God has given you. We have brought nothing into this world, and we're taking nothing out. If you figure that out, we're stewards of what we have. What God has given us, what God keeps giving us, we're stewards of that. We're only people who have to manage that, and for healthy lives, when God flows into us, we flow out. Think of yourself as more of a pipeline or a conduit or a fast-flowing stream of living water. That's what we're like. So when God flows in, we flow out. God flows into us, we flow out. Say that with me. God flows in, we flow out. God flows in, we flow out. You could probably dance to that a little bit, I think. So that's what you remember well that sermon I preached with a number of you actually know roller derby well. I preached a sermon saying I used to watch roller derby with my grandfather, and he had emphysema, so he had an oxygen tank sitting next to him. Well, with emphysema, he could breathe in, but he had a hard time breathing out, and he was pretty sick because he could breathe in, but he couldn't breathe out. The same sermon I mentioned the Dead Sea. Remember the Dead Sea? The Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. Nothing flows out. It flows in, nothing flows out. That's why they call it dead. Nothing can live there. It's 7 to 10 times saltier than the ocean. Oh, you can float. You can float like a bandit on the Dead Sea. Half your body's out of the water. So the other thing is, think of this. Where do the yellow fever-infested, West Nile virus-infested, malaria-infested mosquitoes, where do they breed? They breed in that black, sort of still, sort of stagnant, sort of water. They don't breed in the fast-flowing streams that Tom likes to fish in. They don't breed there. They like to breed in the still, the stagnant part. And one more story. In Luke chapter 12, fascinating story, it says a certain rich man had a huge harvest. And he says, what am I going to do with all this harvest? And he goes, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my little barns, and I'm going to build big barns. I'm going to build big barns, and I'm going to store up this grain, and I'm going to just sit back, relax, and enjoy myself for years to come. I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. That's what I'm going to do. He goes, I'm not going to use those little 5 by 10 storage units. I'm not going to get the 10 by 10. I'm going to get a dozen of those 10 by 40 units and put my stuff in there. I'm going to hoard it. I'm going to catalog it. I'm going to count it. I'm not going to give any of it out. I'm not going to give any of it away. You know what he's called? You fool! You fool! You're a fool! And then when I start writing this, I'm thinking, I wonder if I'm a fool because my basement is so overstuffed with things. I haven't gone to the storage unit yet. But anyway, I'll move past that. So let me show you why I think this scripture tells us that we are to give what the Lord gives us. You know, it starts out in Jonah 1. We didn't read this, but it starts out when God says to Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach against it, because their evil has come up to me, and I've heard about their evil. Go preach against it. Well, as the kids could tell you, he didn't want to go there and preach against it, so he ran as far as he tried to run away from God, jumped in a ship, headed to Tarshish, which is opposite direction of Nineveh, and went down to the hold and was sleeping, and then, of course, the storm comes, and he was outed like he's the one responsible for this. Then he was overboarded, and to actually a certain death. He was headed to a certain death, oh yeah, until God's will kicks in, until God's resurrection power kicks in, until God scoops him up from the bottom of the sea with the great fish. You know, so here's the thing. God was not done with Jonah. He had a purpose for it. He was going to give Jonah something to give to the Ninevites. And listen, God is not done with you. God has something to give you to give to others. God has something to give you to give to others. He's not done with you. Not done. He's going to have a second, you're going to have a second chance, a third chance, a fourth. He's not done with you, just like he wasn't done with Jonah. So now we come to chapter 3, and that's Jonah's second chance. And it says this. It says, then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to that great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message, listen, I give you. Proclaim the message, I give you. Now the King James Version says, preach the proclamation that I give you. The American Standard Version says, proclaim the proclamation that I give you. Do you hear it? It's like, go tell them what I'm going to tell you. You don't have a word to say, yourself. I'm going to give you the word, and you go tell it. So his responsibility was simply to go show up and preach the word that the Lord gives them. He didn't have to make anything up. He didn't have to search the dictionary. He didn't have to search for anything. He shows up, the Lord gives it to him, and then all he has to do is give it out. That's all he has to do. And so that's what the whole thing is. The whole point of this sermon is that when the Lord gives you stuff to give to others. The Lord gives you stuff to give to others. Now, we don't know when, so it says Jonah obeyed. He obeyed and went. We don't know when the Lord's message was given to him. But I would say it this way. I'd say that it was just in time. Just when he needed the message, he received it from the Lord. The Lord gave him the message he needed just in time. We know the Lord provides, always provides, and it's so blatantly clear in Genesis 22 when Abraham was about to kill his son Isaac. And he was up on that mountain, and he had Isaac bound up. He was up on the altar. He was up on the sticks. The knife was up in the air. Just before the knife came down, the Lord provided. The Lord always provides. The Lord provided the lamb. The Lord provided the sacrifice. So the Lord provided the message for Jonah. And what was that message? The message was 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. That's it. 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Now it's very direct, very precise, short, sweet, and terrifying. And I say that because the same word for overthrown was used for Sodom and Gomorrah, that one that was completely wiped off the face of the map because of their evil. So the same, and then what happened next, it says they believed God. God gave Jonah a message, says, go proclaim the message I give you. 40 more days and Nineveh's going to be overthrown. Boom. They believed God. They believed God. And then it says from greatest to least, or least to greatest, everybody repented, put on sackcloth, sat in ashes. Even the animals had to fast. Everyone fasted. Can you picture the poor little puppy dog eyes of the little lambs and little sheep going, can I eat, can I drink? Everyone, and it was a city of over 120,000 people. Everyone that happened, everyone repented and believed. So, what's this say about us? And you're going to tell me, without touching me, you're going to tell me, well, you know what? I'm not a preacher. I'm not a preacher. I can't go say the words. I can't go say this stuff. And I have to agree with you. I understand. But it's biblical to give what the Lord gives you. Remember, you'll always remember the little lady in the temple who went up to the temple, dropped 2 little copper coins in the offering plate. She didn't preach. She didn't preach. She gave what the Lord had given her. And remember Mary, that she dumped a pint of pure nard on Jesus to anoint Jesus? A pint was worth a year's wages. Now, what's a year's? You dump a year's wages on Jesus to anoint him. I don't know what that is for you. 30,000, 60, 90,000, 200,000, I don't know. But a year's wages you dump on Mary. You give what the Lord has given you. She didn't preach. She just dumped it. What about the little boy? The little boy in the crowd of 5,000 men and like 15,000 women, he gave his lunch. He gave what the Lord had given him. He gave his lunch to Jesus, and Jesus said, okay, cool. He fed like 20,000 people. The little boy didn't preach. He gave what the Lord had given him. He gave what the Lord had given him. Now, what about the crazy friends that had this? They had a friend that was a paralyzed guy, and so they take him on a mat, and these crazy guys like rip through the roof. They tear this guy's house apart. They lower this guy down to have Jesus touch him and heal him. They didn't preach. They just simply had the time, the energy, the mindset. They go, all we got to do is take this guy to Jesus. They weren't spending their time like, I don't know, reading or fishing or golfing or skiing or building bigger barns. They had the time and the energy to give to their friend. They weren't preaching, but they were given what the Lord had given them. Given what the Lord had given them. So the last one is in Acts 3. Peter and John were going up to the temple to pray. And a lame guy who had been lame like all his life was begging at the gate called Beautiful, and he's begging for money. And they look at him and they said, look at me. Peter said that. Look at me. And he looked, and he said, silver or gold I don't have. But what I have, I give you. What I have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, get up and walk. He gave what he had. He gave what he had. Friends, this is not a surprise to you. West Grove Church is healthy, it's vital, it's vibrant, it's the friendliest place around, and Mobile Church is thriving and growing as well, because you understand that what God flows into you, you flow out. What you give, what you get. So many of you do give your tithes, your 10%. You give your offerings. You give your treasures. You give your money. You give your time. You give your energy. You give your singing, gorgeous singing voice. And you give your singing voice. You give your leadership on all the different boards. you give your cooking, your serving, your dancing, you give of yourself. What comes into you, you flow out. And when we do that, we're not sick, we are a healthy congregation because what God flows into us, we flow out to one another, to the community, to the world. We flow out to the world. So, friends, the world is transformed. The world is changed. People's lives are changed. People are saved because of what God gives you, you give out. So the only question is, what are we going to give? What are we going to continue to give? Or what can we give in addition as we go forward in 2018 and beyond? Amen.